So hi, I'm Dr. David Purves, and I'm with Chelsea Williams of the website and service Big Bad Brainery. And we've been having conversations, and we've realized that mental health problems for the young, the teens, university students, and going on into later life are at epidemic proportions and really unreasonable proportions. And secondly, we've kind of realized that the strategies that are available, what people do, like what they think of as treatment, are not that helpful at solving these problems to the extent that they just kind of persist. And if you start with a mental health problem when you're really quite young and you're using the wrong strategies, it just really rolls on and on and on and on. And I often see a lot of adults in my clinical practice, who say, I've basically been anxious the whole of my life. And I say, okay, well, how old are you now then? 55. I'm going, okay, that's a lot of wasted time. So anyway, that's enough from me. Hi, Chelsea. How is it in Florida?
It's pretty sweaty right now.
Great. So can you tell me a little bit about your clientele, the people that you work with, and what kind of problems they bring to you for help with?
Sure. So I work with mostly what I call teenagers, which really extends from about anywhere from like 13 to even 20, 21 years old for some. So basically what we would call high school and college over here. So yeah, I see the same thing that, in young people that unfortunately, since I work with them, I also have to work with their parents and, conjunction with their parents. And I see the same kinds of things you're talking about with people saying, well, my child is just this, and they have this disorder or they have this problem, and people kind of being resigned to it as a lifelong diagnosis or something, and kind of just giving up and not realizing that they do have, a lot more power and control than they probably think. So that's what I do is, anxiety coaching one-on-one, but more so trying to educate and empower parents to be able to help their children at home by themselves. So.
Just out of interest, I tend to think of the American system being a little bit over-medicated with respect to medications. Have you ever come across any, relatively young people who believe that they'd have to be on medication for the whole of their lives?
Yes, absolutely. And it, again, starts with what they hear from parents, what they hear from potentially, health professionals if they're working with doctors and things. And yeah, I think, I believe that it's very unfortunate because I have seen, especially since I used to be an academic tutor. So that's what I was, doing for many years, 18 years actually. I used to see kids on medication as young as 5 or 6 years old for, ADHD, all kinds of various, types of medication. And it's only gotten worse, unfortunately, over the years. And so, yeah, now I'm seeing the teenagers who maybe have been on it for 10 or 15 years already, and they don't have any idea how they could ever live without that. So,
do you think the medication actually solves the problem?
Absolutely not. So, I'm certainly not a psychiatrist or, a scientific mental health professional, but in my experience and in my understanding, it absolutely, it's just like any other medication truly. I mean, it helps you feel better in the the short term. It might make you, immediately not have the symptoms, but it's certainly not a long-term solution.
When I find in the work that I've been doing with self-help CBT over many years, that most solutions that are offered to people don't actually solve the problem. They manage the problem. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that medications, etc., are a management tool. They help you to manage the emotions to some degree. You just feel a little bit, to a degree, a bit more tranquilized about it. But the problems persist. And I often find that for one reason or another, if someone stops their medication or changes their medications, often you find that people have to ramp up different medications as they go through the years because the side effects of one need to be managed by another. And I saw someone the other day who showed me a list. I was doing, online therapy, and the list was so long they couldn't remember it all. So they showed me the list, and they had 14 psychotropic medications. And I thought, gosh, that's a journey. And it's not really a journey people need to be on. So if that stuff doesn't solve the problem, what, in your experience, does solve the problem? What have you come across that's actually helpful for people, and it really does, have an effect.
Yeah. So in both my personal life and professionally working with teenagers, I've seen that the first thing is really awareness. It's awareness that this is anxiety. This is what I'm feeling, because especially in teenagers, there can be a lot of avoidance. There can be a lot of shame around that. And so, in my personal life, because I have a stepdaughter who's now 20 years old. And so when she was about 13 or 14, we had no idea what was going on with her. And I think, like a lot of parents, we felt like, okay, she's just acting out, or she's just feeling that, she's just kind of being a normal teenager, quote unquote. And so what changed for her and for us was the awareness of, okay, she's having this response, to a trigger, and that there's there's a root cause behind that, and us helping her work towards that root cause was what really changed everything, empowering her. And so that's what I do with my clients as well. And I find that once they realize that they don't have to outsource it, they don't have to go to all the doctors, the therapists, they can certainly, especially if you're going to a therapist who really helps you with that, not someone who's telling you, you're going to have to come and see me for 20 years, So if you find the right people to work with, and they're guiding you to, the solution where you are empowered to help yourself in the end, that's what we really want for young people, because obviously I think the goal for parents and professionals who work with young people, for us, is to launch them into adulthood. We want them to have those emotional regulation skills. And like I said, the awareness is where it starts. And then from there, you learn, various tools, which some of which we're going to talk about later on, tools for, self-regulation, but also understanding when you need to reach out and to someone who provides emotional safety to you. So that's, a huge key, is, having someone who is a safe person that you can turn to. And then again, like not avoiding, any original traumas or original root causes down the road, but sometimes takes a little while to get there.
So in a sense, we're talking about how to not outsource your well-being.
Yes.
How to not outsource your mental health. Now, I say that sometimes to people, and they kind of go, well, I don't know what that means. Okay. Can you outsource your fitness? Right? Could you pay someone to do the exercise for you, and then you get all the benefits? Right? That'd be super, wouldn't it? Can you outsource a healthy diet? I'll eat fries and burgers and stuff. You eat salads, and we'll be great, right? And I'll pay you for that. It doesn't make much sense, does it? And yet, strangely, we outsource our mental health. Now, if you have a broken leg, you definitely should outsource that. You should definitely get someone to help you with that and just strap it up. But we outsource our mental health, and it seems to me we bring a kind of a fatalism to it. It's as if, well, it's just what it is, right? And I think that fatalism, it's just what it is because people don't actually understand what the problem is.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to think about, well, hang on, if you're anxious, and you must see lots of people who are anxious. If you're anxious, what is anxiety? Mm-hmm. Because if you know what anxiety actually is, all of a sudden it gives you a perspective to the problem. And I think that we need to start to learn to treat mental health problems like human problems. You're in Florida and you're lovely and air conditioned, so you look so cool and calm and collected, and I'm not air conditioned in the hottest day in the last 100 years. But if your air conditioner went out, what would you do?
Well, of course, we'd have to call someone, right?
Yeah, well, you'd solve the problem, right? But if you're anxious or depressed, you're more likely just to sit there and kind of just suffer it.
Yeah.
And that means you're not kind of engaging with the problem as a human problem to solve. And human beings solve problems all the time. But here's the thing, we work with young people, right? And if we can teach young people how to solve their problem by understanding what the problem is, and then applying some tools to it, that would be really be life-changing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I mean, I wish that I had someone kind of teaching me this, you know, in various senses. I mean, I never had any severe like mental health, you know, issues when I was a teenager, but just the general stress, you know, that a lot of the students that you work with through the Stress Buster program, like,
Yeah.
I mean, I was the high achieving perfectionist, you know, thinking that you got to just be on all the time. And I didn't realize that a lot of what I was feeling was actually anxiety, because I think there was no one pointing that out for me. There was no one saying, hey, this is something you can manage. I just thought it's normal to be this stressed out all the time. And so, yes, definitely the fatalism, the, you know, thinking that everybody does this kind of thing. And then also, I'm not sure how this is in the UK, but at least here, especially amongst students, there is the factor of it being cool to be busy. You know, you're just the person who is the busiest. That means you're the most important, you know, especially when you're in university. It's like, oh my gosh, I have to wake up at 7 a.m. and I have 6 classes and I have all this stuff going on. And that was how it was, at least when I was in school. And I still see that with my clients, that, you know, they think that being busy and stressed and not getting any sleep is actually a badge of honor, you know, and that's really, you know, a major problem that unfortunately they absorb, I think, from the adults around them who work really, really hard. So
Yeah. Well, I think the pandemic has given people an opportunity to work differently, so perhaps some of that will change. But I was just looking back through some of the statistics. Here we have the National Health Service and whatnot. It turns out that a half of all mental health problems are manifesting themselves by age 14. Now, suppose someone outsources their mental health, 14 to, you know, whatever age, you're likely to have like an ongoing mental health problem. So perhaps we could think a little bit about, let's think about defining the problem so it's useful for people who are listening, right? Let's have a think about what anxiety actually is, shall we? I've got a formulation which I find really useful. And when people come to see me for anxiety, and I'll generally say, well, okay, how anxious are you? 0, not at all. 10 is as bad as it could be. Right now, sitting there in the chair, how anxious are you? And they'll go, 8. I'll go, 8 out of 10 anxiety. Yeah. You're 8 out of 10 anxious sitting in that chair. Yes. Okay. Have a look around. Where's the threat? Because your anxiety system is designed to deal with threat. Where's the threat? And have a look around, you know. There isn't any. Okay, so why are you anxious? Why is it necessary to be anxious sitting here in my office in the chair, for instance? Well, of course, the answer is it's not necessary to be anxious. Mm-hmm. Absolutely not necessary at all. Okay, so why are you anxious? I don't know. Well, a large part of it is, how long have you been anxious? 5 years. Okay. And if you want to become really good at something, what have you got to do? Go on, Chelsea. What have you got to do? Yeah, practice. Okay, so how long have you been practicing being anxious? 5 years. Okay. I think you're really good at it now. I think you can be anxious without there being any threat, without having to think about it. How does that sound? Sounds sensible, right? Okay. But where does anxiety live? Is anxiety past oriented, present oriented, or future oriented? Where does anxiety live? Past, present, or future? What do you think, Chelsea?
I would say future.
Right. And where do you live?
In the present, of course.
Okay. All right. So basically, you're asking your brain to figure out what's going to happen in the future when it can't do it. Because, you know, if you could figure out what was going to happen in the future, you should definitely do the lottery and, you know, get some other kind of good stuff from that, right? Yeah. So you're always trying to ask your brain to do something it can't possibly do. That's just pointless, right? Mm-hmm. So anxiety is an overestimation of threats, and the threat's like a fantasy threat in the future. So do you think that would apply to your students? Do you think the people that you would work with, for instance, would be open to the idea that their brain is simply overestimating the threat, and that's actually anxiety?
Yeah, because it's, you know, unfortunately, once you get the physical symptoms of anxiety, your body's triggered into a sympathetic nervous system, that state of fight or flight, you then get scared of the anxiety, so I know that you talk a lot about that. And then, again, your brain starts going off and all of the what ifs, and, most of those what ifs never happen. So, yeah.
And yeah, the other thing is, of course, and you've really hit the nail on the head there. When people get physical symptoms, it's like they get sucked into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they lose their awareness that if you think really negative, catastrophic thoughts, if you imagine terrible things happening, you will feel something. And we would call it, it's physiological arousal. And we can identify it as stress, anxiety, anything that, it's all more or less the same physiology. And that's natural and normal. But if you don't realize that the more stressed, the more physiologically stressed you get, the narrower and the narrower and the more restricted your attention is. And what happens is people get focused on how they physically feel, and they lose they fail to remember that in fact their brain's simply overestimating the threat. So they take the symptoms to be meaningful,
right,
when they're not. And
yes.
It's interesting. Sometimes people find that really difficult to grasp. So I get a lemon out. I carry a lemon with me everywhere I go. I haven't got one right there today. And this works really well for me. It doesn't work for somebody else. But if you imagine sucking on a lemon,
mm-hmm.
what's going to happen to your mouth?
The baby face, right?
Yeah, even now my mouth's watering, right? And I have no lemon, it's just my imagination.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was to imagine something really, really bad happening to people I cared about, God, how am I going to feel? Doesn't make it a real thing though, right? It's a real physiology, but it's a fantasy image. So I find that when we think about anxiety like that, it gives us lots of possibilities to work with it and to change it. And if we accept that anxiety is an overestimation of threat, and it's based on fantasies of what might happen in the future, which we can call worry, if you like,
mm-hmm.
it means that actually it genuinely isn't necessary.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, even with the lemon example, or with anything else, your body doesn't really know the difference between the fantasy and the reality. So you imagine the worst case scenario. Like, I mean, as a parent, sometimes you have those horrible thoughts like, what if something happens to my child? I think like biologically we're probably all wired to have those at some point. And it's horrible. You can actually get into that physical state of like, it's happening right now, even if it never will.
Yeah.
So yeah, what that means is it's terrifying if you allow it to be that way, but it's also empowering to realize, my thoughts, my imagination, my response, to this has the same power in the other direction to actually calm me down and make me recognize I'm safe, I'm grounded, I'm not going anywhere right now, nothing is happening to me. So yeah, I mean, it's the physical part of it can take over, but then there's that additional imagination on top of it.
Indeed. And of course, when the physical part of it takes over, that's when the medications, in a sense, have their role,
mm-hmm.
but then they help to manage it. So then you don't have to deal with the actual problem because you don't feel quite so bad.
Right.
I call it going with the flow. Near me, there's the River Thames, which flows through London. It starts up in, I think, I don't know where it starts. I forgot where it starts. Anyway, it flows towards London. And if you had a boat on the River Thames and you didn't have an engine, and you just would go with the flow.
Yeah.
But eventually you'll end up where you don't want to be. You'll end up going over a weir, or you'll end up somewhere, and people always, they say, well, how did I get here? I didn't expect this to happen. Yeah, well, if you don't do anything active to manage the experience, you will end up where you don't want to go.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that people get absorbed by the contents of their worry? Do you find that they go, yeah, I'm so worried about my health. I'm so worried about my grades. I'm so worried about what I'm going to do after school, after university.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I've been there. That's happened to me plenty of times. And I think there are levels, there are layers to that, because, there's the part that is sort of, cultural, and we turn on the news and it seems like everybody's just worried all the time, and so there are layers to it. And I do think when we're talking about people that have more severe traumas or relationships, like I myself, used to be in a narcissistic, abusive relationship. So that kind of thing, absolutely, you can just feel triggered and worried all the time, and you never know, because you're trying to predict someone else's behavior.
Yeah.
So that's maybe a different experience than, I'm worried about my grades. I'm worried about something that I am, sort of autonomous about, this is my path or my life. Like it gets a little more complex, I think, when there are relationships and other people involved, because that's what I find a lot of times my clients are worried about other people. They're worried about their friends and what people think about them, and, all of these sort of somewhat normal teenage, experiences.
Yeah.
But really getting them to come back to understanding that you're in control of you and how you react, and how, that really does make a huge difference, that we cannot control other people. We can't control what's happening in the world right now. Obviously, that's a perfect example. But yeah, people get stuck in the worry of, not just what's going to happen to them, but what's going to happen, the people, what are the people around them going to do? And that's an impossible thing for us to predict. So.
It is. I find that everybody gets caught in the worry. Mm-hmm. So I do this little exercise with people. I say, look, I worry about chicken. I worry about global warming. I worry about money. I worry about health. I worry about relationships. What's my problem?
The worry.
I worry. It doesn't matter what I worry about. And that's and I think that gives us a relationship to the problem, that we can do something about it, right? Again, worry is the thinking part of anxiety, and it's always future-based. So you're basically asking your brain to solve a problem. Will people like me? If I go there, will I have friends? If I do that, what will people say? If I don't do that, what will people say? Right? It's always about what if. What if's going to happen? What if, is the consequence of that? But it's in the future, and you're basically asking your brain to solve a problem in the present, and the answer lives in the future, therefore it cannot do it. So a lot of people think worrying is a useful thing to do, which is a mistake, of course, because it's an entirely non-useful thing to do. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, yeah, but I'm trying to figure out the worst possible outcome. Yeah, okay. You're not actually. You're imagining the worst possible outcome and inhabiting it emotionally and then feeling bad.
Yeah.
So I think that we need to recognize that the whole process of worry, which drives the thinking part of anxiety and it drives the anxiety, is just a habit of thought,
Absolutely. It's funny when you say the worst possible outcome. That is what I talk to parents about all the time because that is where their minds go. It's what if my child doesn't get into this college? What if my child doesn't, and they do all the worrying for their kids and think that they're taking some kind of burden away from them. And the truth is, it's like, you're not helping them at all. Your worries are they're feeling that energy and they're absorbing that worry. And, it's funny when years ago, when my kids were little, I used to tell them, well, just when you're worried about something, just imagine what's the worst thing that could happen, because thinking that, okay, if you imagine the worst thing that can happen and it doesn't sound very practical, then you're just going to be able to let it go, right? But it actually has the opposite effect because like you said, when you imagine the worst thing that can happen, your mind gets really trapped in that and your body gets trapped in the feeling of it. So
yeah. A client once told me a nice phrase, which I've always remembered. She says, catastrophe is a journey I go on every day. And I rather like that. I made a video about that. She goes and comes back to catastrophe every day and then goes to sleep. Well, yeah. Okay. So we've established that mental health problems start young. We've established that if you deal with them the wrong way, if you outsource your mental health, you're likely to have a poor outcome, and the problem's not going to go away. It's just going to be either managed or medicated. And I much prefer the problem going away. I love it when my clients say to me, well, I say to them, So what's been happening, And they say, oh, I forgot to be anxious this week. And that's how you know a problem's gone away, because you forget to have the problem. If you have a broken leg, you can't forget to have a broken leg.
Right.
But you can forget to be anxious. And if you forget to be anxious, you're not anxious. And I find that's really, really kind of a nice consequence of taking control of your own mental health, So shall we think about some tools that we can use to better manage mental health? Because given we've said that anxiety is unnecessary, worry is unhelpful, and if we take back control of our mental health instead of outsourcing it, it's quite possible that we don't have to have these problems for the whole of our life. What would that be worth? Like, you don't have to be anxious for the whole of your life. You don't have to be depressed for the whole of your life.
Right.
I mean, it's easy to say these phrases, isn't it? And yet, and yet, I was just looking at some statistics. Probably about a third of people in the UK who are on antidepressants have no medical basis for being on them. They just on a repeat prescription for year after year after year. And in the UK, that turns out to be 1.2 million people. In America, it's 6 million people on antidepressants or something with no medical basis. And it could be that just coming off them is so bad that you just got to stay on them. Mm-hmm. So our alternative is actually just to get rid of the problem altogether. Don't medicate it, don't manage it. Deal with it. Yes. Retrain your brain, rewire your brain, a little bit of time and effort. Mm-hmm. Move on with your life, just forget about it.
Yeah, but that sounds like the scary and hard thing, right, to some people?
Why would it be scary and hard?
Well, I mean, the answer that I hear all the time is that that's what their parents did, that's what that's what everybody does, so at least from young people, and so unfortunately, I think we're passing down a cultural avoidance, because we haven't ourselves been taught to deal with our emotions and our past and our traumas and our whatever, the source of that original depression, anxiety is. And unfortunately, it's not as scary and hard as people think, but it feels scary because they've never done it before. So
in school and college, you learn some history, you learn some geography, some mathematics, some English, some, physics, chemistry, biology. You learn all that stuff, right? Did you learn a single thing that was useful to you in managing your mental health?
Nope.
Not a single thing. Mm-hmm. Okay. So as you say, it seems hard because people don't know how to do it.
Yes.
But actually, it's not that hard. It's dead simple. Mm-hmm. Because when you understand the problems in a simple way, it's relatively easy to solve them. I mean, it takes a bit of time and effort, right? It takes a bit of practice. But it's a lot easier than learning to play the piano, I would suggest. Which I think is pretty hard.
Oh, yeah. Easier than learning how to make a YouTube video or anything that the kids do these days anyway.
Yeah, okay.